So, in trying to figure out different shows, different content to bring you each week, I was talking to my producer Toby Goodman, and he mentioned a friend of his, Gary Lloyd, who is a really big deal in the theater industry in the UK, in the concert industry around the world. And I was wondering why this would be a relevant conversation to have on mastering midlife. And the more I looked at Gary's career and what he's done with himself and the people he's met, it made perfect sense that growing up, being successful in one venue and having to evolve was the perfect conversation to be having for mastering midlife. So Gary Lloyd is, he's a director and choreographer who is, sought after. He's blushing right now on the screen if you could see. He started out in musical theater. He's been in TV. He choreographs. When I looked at the list of people he's choreographed and the shows he's choreographed, he does stadium tours. He wrote a book called My Life with Michael, which is a chronicle of his 10 years of doing Thriller Live, which is just a phenomena in the theater world. So today he's here just to talk to us about his life and how he's evolving in the world. Gary, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
I almost called you Michael, which is probably something that's happened like a million times in your life since your career is so synonymous with Michael Jackson, right? Like that gave you your world stage, in other words.
It is, yeah. I mean, I've been very lucky to have a very successful career as a performer, as an actor, as a dancer, and I started assisting very early on with some very big choreographers here in the UK, and so I've kind of followed a very natural path of progression when it comes to my career. And yeah, Thriller has kind of been the thing that stuck. I think when you become a director or a choreographer, you always think the thing that you're working on at the time is the best thing you've ever done because you're putting your heart and soul into it, but you never know what's going to happen with these projects and the product that you put out. And Thriller at the time was kind of frowned upon by the theater industry because it was very music industry based. And we've been lucky enough to have, it's a 12-year lifespan now. And theatre has changed so much. Some of the biggest shows that are in the West End and on Broadway right now are Hamilton. Six has been a phenomena over here in the UK, which is about to open on Broadway. And they are all based on music and rap and, contemporary ways of looking at things. So I like to think that Thriller had a big part in that.
Yeah. So tell me how you got your start. Tell me who you were when you were a kid and just starting out.
Well, I come from a very musical family. My dad he was a bass player in a few bands. He played with the Walker Brothers. So his biggest claim to fame is playing bass on the number one hit, The Sun Ain't Gonna Shine Anymore, among others. So very, very musical household. My mum was very musical as well. And that was very apparent in myself and my sister. So we took music lessons in school, but I think my parents obviously saw something else in us, and we ended up learning ballroom and Latin American dancing at age 4 and 6. We did that competitively.
My mother did teach me the Lindy when I was a kid.
Right, it's really handy. I mean, even if you don't become a dancer or you do, and then you give it up, it's great for weddings and parties. And when you're self-isolating and you're in the kitchen with the kids, it's fantastic. So we started out competing and doing all our exams and everything in ballroom and Latin American, and then eventually moved into stage and musical theatre. And there was no other path. It was performance and nothing else. Even through school.
So tell me, how did you make this a career and a money? Like how you made your livelihood?
I did the 3-year course. Moved to London at the tender age of 16, and even at college, it was creating, it was choreographing, it was directing other people, bossing other people about. And I've been very lucky to sort of bounce from job to job. And in every job that I've done, there's been an opportunity to be the dance captain or to be the assistant choreographer, or I seem to sort of push myself to the front to ensure that I was involved in some kind of creative fashion. So it's obviously in my blood, and I just pursued it. You know, it was never a question that I wouldn't succeed in that department. The one thing I advise young people who often ask me, you know, how did you get to where you are? We want a career in choreography or direction. Is you know, I say to them to walk through the doors of opportunity that open. You know, which is one thing that I did. I never analysed anything too much, which I think young people
So what if
tend
you
to
don't have the
do.
skills? What if the door opens and you're like, I can't do that, or that's too much for me to think about?
I think if somebody is overwhelmed, they're not going to walk through that door. But I think the one thing you have on your side when you're young is kind of, you know, you're bold, it's bravado. You don't think too much about what's on the other side, you know. And I think kids today, they analyze or they plan, you know, perhaps a bit too far in advance. I think, you know, that's the way of the world today. And they have, you know, way too much information at their fingertips, which I think kind of feeds into that.
So in other words,
Analytical
instead
mindset.
of blindly trusting life as with opportunities coming, with things coming, it's like let's plan the road, and then you miss opportunities because you have your eye on this ball.
I think so. I mean, hearing you, you know, that wonderful intro that you made at the beginning of the podcast, you know, always hearing my credits is interesting because I do have such a varied resume, and I've worked, you know, on polar opposite sides of the industry, which in the UK isn't as, it's not as accepted as it is in the US. I think you guys, you're quite happy to let people be good at lots of different things, whereas over here, you know, they like to label you and put you in a box, and you know, you're a theatre guy or you're a music guy, or you know, you
But
can't.
it's funny in business that's not true. In
Right.
business, a lot of times people are like you're an accountant. This is what you do. You're in finance. You know, like you have a lane. Stay in your lane. So generalists usually have to go out on their own.
Yeah.
Usually recognized within the corporate structure. So,
Right.
that's something that I've noticed here quite a bit.
Okay. I think in the creative industries, it's the opposite in the US. Um, Whereas over here, it's changing slowly, but you know, it's something that I've had to fight my whole career. You know, so it's wonderful to sort of get to this point and look back and go, do you know what? I fought against the grain. I stuck to my guns. I went where the music took me, and succeeded against all the odds.
I just want to tease out a little nuance at what you were talking about, because when I'm thinking about your career, I make the clumsy analogy from sports to business, from the arts to business. But what I noticed that you said, you didn't go from being a dancer, right? You know, an athletic, pretty, you know, one trick pony to, oh no, I can't dance the way I used to. I have to go do this now, right? Or like a baseball player who just plays baseball, right, and isn't involved in anything else, or you know, something like that. What you did was you looked at opportunities outside of your lane your whole entire career. So you weren't just a dancer, you weren't just a choreographer, you weren't just anything, and you actually expanded your horizons as you were going. So as life evolved, as your body and as your talents changed, you were able to evolve with what you needed and wanted to do in the world.
Yeah, that's right. It's interesting actually because just finishing the book that you mentioned, My Life with Michael, which is, you know, it's an anecdotal, autobiographical look at the 10 years that we've spent on the show, and lots of stories about some various characters and things that have happened, not only in the West End production, but around the world. I came across, literally a week after delivering the book to the publisher, I came across a suitcase that was full of stories and scripts that I wrote when I was probably about 10 or 11. And I'd completely forgotten about them. And, I read through them, and some of them were really good, some of them were terrible, but I kind of thought, oh my God, this writing thing, I knew it was there, but I'd forgotten how much it was there, along, with the directing kids in the neighborhood and being that bossy kid that would pull everybody together and put a show on in the street or in the living room. I've done it from a very early age. So I'm very lucky that what is in my blood and what I was obviously meant to do, I've managed to be able to, from a business perspective, I guess, turn that into a success.
Well, yeah. So you actually, you are a businessman. You're an artist, but you're also a businessman. You figure out how to fund and get projects going. You're also an enroller, because if you have ideas, you have to enroll people into your idea, right?
Right.
So where'd you learn your leadership skills in having people see your vision, follow your vision, and want to build your vision?
I think I learned all of that from teaching. When I was performing in the West End, I couldn't just sit around all day long, and turn up to the theatre at 6 o'clock and do my warm up and do my show. It was really important to me to keep active during the day. So I would go into the major colleges in London and I would teach.
Another skill you just kept adding to your bag, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, it was, and I love teaching. I love giving back. I love the reward that you get from, helping that one student that cares so much but needs a bit of help, or, whatever it is, or leading a group, a pack of people and teaching them something that they didn't know. I just think that's wonderful. And I really miss it, actually. But when teaching, I got to hone my choreography. I got to learn what my style was, and I had hundreds of guinea pigs, in these classes that I used to teach, and that was brilliant. But I guess the leadership stuff, the more you teach, the more opportunities the colleges will give you, and you end up getting more hours and more classes, and you become more and more valuable to them. So before long, I was the head of dance at one particular college. And with that comes paperwork, it comes organization, it comes, lesson plans and the leadership that you're talking about. So I think I learned most of that there.
What was the biggest risk you took?
As a teacher?
And no, just the big, like, betting on yourself.
Oh, gosh.
Like, this is crazy. What am I doing?
I think the most out of my depth sink or swim scenario I think I've been in. I was very lucky at the turn of the millennium, shall we say, sort of 2000, 2001. The manager, Simon Fuller, who created 19 Management and put together groups like the Spice Girls, S Club 7. He created American Idol. Lots of stuff. He's working.
Did you say Simon Fuller?
Yeah.
I thought it was Simon Cowell. He takes all of the credit.
He does take the credit. It was Simon Fuller that created Pop Idol and then American Idol. And they worked on that together. And then Simon Cowell went away.
Okay, so he's the face of it all.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the X Factor is Simon Cowell's project. But I'd say that Simon Fuller came up with the concept of these talent shows that, are still running now. But I was involved with Simon and a lot of his artists back in the very early days of these things happening. And of course, these talent shows, they would run the course of the season. And then at the end of the season, you would take the top 10 and you would put them on the road. And it was me that kind of put those shows together. I did 3 years in America. And it was that first year where I was brought over and it was just, right, okay, put a show together and go.
So tell me you have no responsibility for Justin and Kelly.
No.
That movie.
I'm not going to take responsibility for that.
Okay, good. So that's really fascinating. So now you've taken the time, and I hate to dare insult you by saying now that you're in midlife, because where I describe midlife is, you've had a career, you've had a time, and then writing your memoir, writing this book probably was a cathartic thing to go over your time, right? To really go introspective, look at the chapters that came before. And now when you're done with that book, you have like a blank page of, now what are the chapters am I going to write? I did some things that were great. Now what is the chapter? What's that like to go over your career, all the highlights, all the lowlights, all the challenges and everything, and then come out the other side after really going inside for a while?
It was incredibly cathartic. You're absolutely right. I think when I set out to start the book, it was a project that just had to happen. We were approaching 10 years. I'd been speaking to a writer friend of mine who was a dad friend. It was a conversation in the playground when we were dropping the kids off. He's also a massive Michael Jackson fan, and he just kept saying, "You got to write this book. You got to write this book." So I wrote a couple of chapters, and they were so kind of meaty. And I kind of looked at them and thought, there are hundreds more stories where these 2 chapters have come from. So the thing just flowed out of me. It was very cathartic going through some of the highs and the lows, and then, you know, remembering things, interviewing people, and, you know, hearing what they'd remembered, and kind of
Did people remember things differently than you did?
Yeah, because we were all in different places at different times, you know, and some of the people that have been in the shows and backstage and working on the show full time have read the book and come back to me and got, you know, sort of said, wow, we didn't realize that your take on it was so different to ours.
Right.
And obviously, as the director and the choreographer, my role as part of the creative team, we would set the show up, we would audition, we would produce and put the thing on, and then we let it go and other people take over. So there's a whole other set of stories that happen outside of mine, you know. So it's been interesting, sort of publishing of the book, sharing those stories with people, you know. But yeah, it's really opened up another passion. I think, you know, referencing this back to the midlife thing, it's given me another option of where to take my business and where to take my creativity.
And what's that?
To continue writing. You know, there are hundreds of other shows that I've been involved in where there are just as interesting and you know, fruitful stories that could be written about.
So there are more. So there's more books.
Yeah. The plan. Well, there are a few projects already kind of in development, and one is it's going to be a series, and it's a kind of fiction based on fact series. So all the stuff in it is true, but
who gets to play you? Who gets to play you?
What, in the movie?
In the movie, in the TV show, who gets to play you? Who do you want?
I don't know. I haven't thought about that.
I would be thinking about that from the get-go.
Yeah.
Who do I want to be represented by? Who do I see myself as? So cool. So now you've been successful. You have new talents and new skills and new interests going on. How do you view this next chapter? How do you view what's next for you? Like, you know, where are you? And, you know, do you see yourself as an elder? Do you see yourself still as a warrior? How do you see yourself in the industry and in your career?
Well, it's very interesting because I think with using Thriller as an example, because that was an ongoing thing, and I've gone from being, you know, one of the creators and at the helm of that production, being a big part of its success and being very young, vibrant, and constantly creating and recreating to keep it fresh, to having a team of people that would sort of take my work, teach it, and, you know, sort of go out into the world and take care of it, and quality control and all of that. you kind of get to a point where yes, I'm working on other things, and that becomes sort of the day job in a sense. But the book kind of brought me back to the beginning. So I would say that writing the book and remembering a lot of that early stuff has sort of reintroduced me to my inner warrior.
Mm.
To quote, yourself with those words. So yes, I'm moving on in my career, but that's kind of reinvigorated me and reminded me of who I was 10 years ago.
So tell me the difference between being a warrior when you're young, like we talked about, like you're young and you don't know better and you go try things and all that stuff. That's a warrior energy all in of itself.
Yeah,
Now you're wiser, now you're experienced, and you find that, because I find the same thing in my career. I was a warrior, I was a sales guy, I raised a family, I did all these things, right? And then I finally accepted my elderhood. And that took a
right.
long time. I was, I like being young and pretty. I like competing. I did not want to be an elder. But now that I've accepted my elderhood, that warrior part of me with the experience and the depth is alive and well, just different.
Yeah. I was becoming an elder. I have one son, and that changes everything. So the work became about providing. It became less about creating and more about providing. And I could feel that happening. And I kind of resented that in a way, but needs must. And, the elder and the provider took over because there was a more important human being in my life.
How old's your son?
He's 9.
Nice.
Yeah, great age. Um, and I'm allowing the warrior to come back into into our life and our relationship now because he's older, and we can have on level conversations, and it's a really, really good time. But I think, what am I trying to say here? I think you sort of just drift into the elder and having to provide and having to pay those bills and all of that kind of stuff just sort of takes over. And so again, writing this book has just enabled me to go, do you know what? You can have a bit of both. You can be this sensible, serious parent, but it's also important that your son learns how to be fun and creative and throw the rule book out every now and again and learn to look after himself. But just be creative in all elements, I guess.
You see, I love that. And that's the thing that I spend so much time trying to convince a lot of the people that I work with is like, you're not dead. It's not dead at 40, buried at 70, right?
Mm.
You have responsibilities. You do have things that need to be taken care of, right? You made choices so that people depend on you. But that does not mean that you're in a straitjacket and you can't do anything but take care of those things. In the U.S., yes, you need health care, right? That's a big thing here, right? You need to
Yeah.
somehow to be able to provide health care for your family. There's certain standards of living that you need to be able to provide for your family. After that, nobody wants you to die. Nobody wants you to cut off all those creative juices. You're not doing your kids, you're not doing your spouse, you're not doing anybody any favors by dying to your responsibilities. And that both end that you're discovering, I think, is the secret to the next chapter. Your creativity is at its highest, your wisdom and your experience, and you just have all these tools. And it's a shame to shut it off because you feel strangled by your responsibilities.
Yeah, it's interesting. The release of the book took me back to teaching as part of
I
the
was wondering when this was coming back because I
yeah,
could see you light up.
it's an interesting thing because I kind of stopped the teaching. Every now and again I would go into one of the colleges and choreograph a number for their show. I directed 3 shows for one particular drama school. Loved it. Because it's unconditional. You've got these kids, you have to cast the show from this group of kids. So you're drawing upon this pool of talent. There isn't, you can't keep going, you can't keep auditioning. This is it. So you have to make it work, and you have to inspire them to be able to make it work, you know. So I found myself back in that environment, just doing masterclasses based on the book and the show, but realizing that these kids were hungry for much more information outside of what I'd written about. You know, they wanted to know more about me and what happened before Thriller. So that's very much part of the next step of the journey, is getting back into that, which is crazy.
So would you say fulfillment now, a lot of fulfillment now is giving back?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've kind of got to the point where I feel successful enough where I can choose the projects that I want to work on in terms of the productions and the shows. There are certain things that come along that don't interest me. There are other things that tend to be new work where I'll jump at the chance to get involved in that. And, you know, just weirdly, I'm doing a lot more writing when it comes to scripts and developing the work that I'm directing. So there's a bit of synergy there. But yeah, I think giving back in the writing, the teaching, just general day to day really is where it's at.
So 30 or 40 or 50 years from now, when you leave this plane, how do you want to be remembered? What do you want your legacy to be?
I think I would like to be remembered as someone who broke the rules and made it work. I think that's a big thing for me. I would like to be considered as someone that always cared for the actor. You know, quite often people, they get into a position of progression and they become a choreographer or a director and they forget what it was like to be that guy at the beginning. And I've never forgotten that. And I that's one thing I use in my work. You know, I'm very respectful towards the people that I work with because I think that's the best way to get the best work out of them. So I would definitely like to be remembered for that.
Beautiful. You know, just everything that you've done. Going over your list of accomplishments, the things you've been involved in. So many of them actually were joys in my life, right? So I really appreciate what you have brought to the world. And I appreciate you taking the time because I know your family is in the car, so
Yes.
that you can actually have some peace and quiet to do this show. So I'm going to let you get back to them and give you that back your freedom. Thank you for sharing your brilliance with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for having me.
To everybody else, I hope you enjoyed this as much. I could actually talk to Gary for hours. I have so many questions for him, but we're going to let him go and we're going to let you go. I love you. Have a great rest of the day. And remember, your creative juices are still relevant. Have a great day.